Did you know that in the United States, about 10% of all homes and apartments are hit by a natural disaster every year, usually a fire, a flood, or a hurricane? And as we emit more and more greenhouse gases, that number is only going to grow. And when Americans decide to move, about 1/3 of them mention climate change as a major reason why. People in California don't want to risk living in a house that will get burned down. Residents from Florida and Louisiana don't want their homes flooded by rising sea levels. And worldwide, about 21.5 million people are already displaced from their homes every year because of climate change. So, are you next? Should you move not just to avoid natural disasters, but also to have a sustainable access to resources during a crisis? Well, there are too many specifics under that question, but a better question might be, what are some places that are safer than others from climate change? Whether we like it or not, climate change is already here, and if you're a denier, there's more than enough evidence out there that is actually reliable to prove otherwise. You can deny climate change all you want, but you cannot avoid it. Even if the whole world somehow stopped burning all fossil fuels today, we have already caused a lot of irreversible changes, and it would take several years before that momentum stops and reverses. I really wish we took care of this problem decades ago when it was made obvious that humans were the primary driver behind climate change. But considering that we didn't take enough action, and we still haven't all these years later, I think the best thing for all of us to do is to figure out how we can individually adapt to climate change. One of the best things that you can do is live in a location that will minimize the dangers that come with climate change. Where could you move in 10 years or beyond and still live a relatively normal life that you have right now? To answer that question, I think it makes more sense to first ask where you may not want to live, and then see what is left. We need to stay away from places that are prone to disasters and move to places that have plentiful access to resources like food and water, especially in a crisis when essential resources are in high demand. We also need to find places with affordable housing and places that are willing to decarbonize so that the situation doesn't get worse. What's going on, you guys? Welcome to my channel. I'm Aman Luthra, and today I'm going to be talking about the best places to live during climate change. I'm mostly going to focus on the United States, but even if you don't live in America, you should still be aware of the dangers that climate change presents throughout the world and in the area that you live in, so listen up. So let's figure out the first part, which is staying away from disasters. The most notable disasters to avoid are wildfires, extreme heat, hurricanes, and sea level rise. So wildfires will be a problem if you live in a place that does not get consistent rainfall throughout the year. In the United States, the first place that comes to mind is probably California, where nearly 2.2 million acres were burned by fires in 2021. And nearly 15% of all homes and buildings were at risk of being burned down. How much money do you think California spent to help suppress wildfires in 2021? $1.3 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B. When my sister and I were driving to and from Yosemite National Park in April, almost half the trees looked like that they were burned down from fires. And it's not just California. A lot of West Coast states like Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Arizona are also heavily prone to wildfires because a large chunk of their land is similar to California's, where it does not rain often during the year. So I think it's fair to say that the West Coast and anywhere else that's super dry with a lot of vegetation is probably not the best place to live during climate change. Another natural disaster to be mindful of is extreme heat, which is going to be a problem almost anywhere, but certain areas like the South and the Great Plains are going to experience heat waves more often than northern states. Extreme heat is also what usually leads to droughts and sometimes famines around the world because it becomes so hard to grow crops. I grew up in Georgia for most of my life, and I could definitely notice more and more frequent heat waves with every passing summer. And there are plenty of days in December and January that you can walk around in a t-shirt and shorts. Heat waves are also going to be a big problem for anyone that lives in a desert environment. Already in places like Arizona, it gets so hot in the summer that airplanes cannot even generate enough lift to take off. Generally speaking, extreme heat will be a big problem for anyone that lives in the southern half of the US or even in the Great Plains, because there won't be enough vegetation to cool off those areas. If you live in a grasslandy area or anywhere close to the equator, these are also places where extreme heat will be a problem. So those might not be the best places to live in the long term. Now let's talk about hurricanes. More frequent and intense storms also include typhoons, tornadoes, and cyclones, depending on where you are in the world. An average of 10 hurricanes form over the Atlantic coast every summer. and usually 2 to 3 of them will end up as category 3 or higher, and that's when the winds reach 110 miles per hour. Those are the ones that you'll usually hear about in the news, and unfortunately climate change is only going to increase the number of hurricane headlines you'll hear. In the United States at least, hurricanes will be a massive problem for anyone living in the southeast US, especially along the Gulf of Mexico and in Florida. Hurricanes could really hit just about anywhere along the East Coast, but it's not going to be as much of a problem in the northern states where it is cooler and ocean waters cannot evaporate as easily. So worldwide, hurricanes will usually be a problem for anyone that lives near the equator. So moving closer to the North or South Pole, depending on which hemisphere you're in, will help to minimize the exposure to hurricanes and any other tropical storm. The last major threat we have to discuss is sea level rise. Since 2020, the sea level has been rising by nearly 3 to 4 inches every year. That's nearly 3 feet by 2030, and that will be more than enough to cause permanent flooding in cities like Miami, New Orleans, and even New York City. The rate of sea level rise is only going to accelerate with time. A lot of people think that sea level rise is caused by melting glaciers and polar ice caps. And that's definitely true, but one thing you may not know is that when water gets warmer, it actually expands and takes up more volume, and that also feeds into the acceleration of sea level rise. In fact, you can probably guess that sea level rise will be a problem for just about anyone in the world that lives in a coastal city. Even if you don't live near a coast, you should be mindful of the elevation near the coast. That's why places like Florida and Louisiana are at massive risk. Not only do they have a lot of coastline, but a large chunk of their land is also very close to sea level. So when it comes to sea level rise, the rule is pretty straightforward. Move inland and stay away from the coast. So now that we talked about the major natural disasters that come with climate change, let's figure out what's left in the United States. The West Coast is generally off limits because of wildfires. The southern US and the Great Plains are off limits because of extreme heat. The southeast US and most of the East Coast is off limits because of hurricanes. And finally, pretty much any coastal areas are off limits because of sea level rise. So based on the map that you see here, the Midwest and the states that border the Great Lakes would be the safest from natural disasters. Not only that, but the Midwest will also have plenty of access to fresh water with all 5 of the Great Lakes, and it is a very popular region for agriculture as well. In other words, you're going to have plenty of food there. Right now, about 75% of the farmland in the Midwest is used for growing corn and soybeans, which is usually fed to livestock. The other 25% is used for growing fruits, vegetables, and grains. And if a lot of people end up moving to the Midwest because of climate change, I would definitely expect that more fruits, vegetables, and grains will be grown there so that they can support the surrounding population. And finally, most of the states in the Midwest and around the Great Lakes have some of the most affordable housing in the US, except New York perhaps. On average, the Midwest states have housing that is equivalent to or even less than 15% of people's monthly income. Now, I am saying this in 2022, when the demand for living in the Midwest is not necessarily the highest. If a bunch of people move to the Midwest because of climate change, then I would definitely expect housing costs to go up there. But as of now, the Midwest and the states near the Great Lakes seem to be the best place to live in the age of climate change. They are the safest from wildfires, extreme heat, hurricanes, and sea level rise. Those states will also have plenty of access to fresh water, food, and affordable housing. Now, the reality is that no location is going to be 100% safe from all of the worst effects of climate change, but some of the locations that I just mentioned will definitely be safer than others. And the good news is that unless you're already facing an immediate threat like a wildfire or a flood, you don't have to move immediately. At the same time, it's important to be mindful of the dangers that climate change presents and how it can affect the place that you live at right now in the coming years. And it's important to think about where you may want to live in 10 or 20 years when natural disasters unfortunately become a much bigger problem than they are today. I really hope this video did not ruin your mood, but instead gave you hope that there are places that we can go to that will be safer than others during climate change. I really wish we solved this problem a long time ago, but instead of looking on the things that individuals like you and me don't have control over, I think it's important to look at what we do have control over. We can control where we live, the kind of shelter that we have, the foods that we eat, and the daily choices that we make. And if you want to learn more about how you might want to prepare for a climate crisis, check out this video in the top right corner, and I'll include it in the description as well. So do you think the Midwest is the best place to live during climate change? What are some other places that you think might be better? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, then please give it a like and subscribe down below. I make climate change videos very regularly on this channel, and I cover topics like climate change politics and the actions that we need to take in order to mitigate climate change and adapt to it. So if that's something you're interested, then ring the bell and turn on your notifications too. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a blessed day. See ya!